Hello, welcome to the Lehigh University Sports Broadcasting Club podcast. I am your host, Nick Deligtisch. I'm joined by Zach Porter and Jackson Kramp. Today, we're going to be talking about the upcoming MLB season as we're recording this on Monday. Opening day is in not even 3 days. We have Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Thursday we have opening day. So it's extremely close. We're all really excited. So today we're going to be going through our divisional predictions, and then we're going to go through the playoffs and just discuss who we think we're going to win the World Series. So we're going to start out with the AL East. The questions that we're going to ask today is who's your pick to win the division and who do you think is going to make the playoffs in the division? So Zach, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the AL East this year?
Yeah, I mean, my pick to win the division, I think the Orioles will repeat. They're a young team, and I think they just got better and more talented. Jackson Holliday didn't make the opening day roster, but he will definitely be called up sometime during the year, and they've got plenty of other prospects that are coming up as well. And the addition of Corbin Burns finally gives them a true ace in that rotation. They won a ton of games last year, and they're going to do it again this year. Guys like Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson are for real. As for who else is going to make the playoffs, I think the Yankees will also make it. If Carlos Rodon can bounce back, that gives them a really potent rotation. And along with Judge and Soto in the lineup, those are two of probably the top five hitters in baseball, which is just insane to have them hitting back to back. However, I think there are some holes in both the rest of that lineup and the rotation, but they'll be enough to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with your picks on that. I'm going to toss it to you, Jackson, first, and then I will give my picks and wrap up the division.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like I'm going a similar track to Zach, but I have the Rays winning the division. I think that they're just I don't know, for the past couple of years they've impressed me and how they've been able to stay a bit consistent. And I think that I kind of think the AL East, I envision it kind of just everyone beating each other. Especially the Yankees, Orioles, and Rays just kind of all smashing each other to bits. And so I think the Rays will come out of it on top. And then I have the Orioles coming in also making the playoffs. Kind of a similar deviation to Zach. Basically, they're a young team. They have all the talent. I just think that a lot of times these younger teams they'll have that one break a year, and then they're going to kind of take a step back. Um, and then if I were to like prophesize for the future, they'd be next year. They're my World Series kind of like dark horse, not even dark horse, or just a contender. But the shock pick, right, is the Yankees. I don't think the Yankees can make the playoffs. I think they're the team that they get beat up, they beat each other up, and they lose. They're out by like one game, and everyone's just mad in the whole city of New York. I'm gonna be ready for it.
I have a feeling that you're kind of just trying to get on my nerves, Jackson. But
Why would I ever do that?
yeah. Those aren't really wild takes, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm a Yankees fan. You're an Orioles fan, right? You're an Orioles fan.
No, I'm
Or no,
American.
you're not even. Yeah, I got confused because you're a Ravens fan. But anyway, I have similar picks to you guys. Believe it or not, as a Yankees fan, I have the Orioles winning the division. I do feel like the Orioles are due for regression, not significant regression. I think last year they won like 100, 203 games. They played above their heads for sure last year. It's not a knack on their season. I just feel like that they're due for a little bit of regression. I have them at like 94, 93 wins. And then I have the Yankees at around 92 to 91 wins. I feel like we'll be right behind the Orioles. And I like last year was just a disaster. Like everything went wrong. Like there's no way that the Yankees don't improve. Like if they have a worse season than last year, then everybody's getting fired and traded. Like I highly doubt we will have a worse season than last year. But moving on to like the Rays, I don't know, man. Like I know they're consistent every year, but it comes to a point where they just get rid of so much talent where it hurts them. For example, like Tyler Glasnow is a really good pitcher. Yes, he doesn't get a lot of WAR because he gets injured a lot, but he's still a very good pitcher. And they also like they got rid of some hitters. There's no Shane McClanahan this year. I don't trust them. I think they're still going to make the playoffs, but I don't trust them. Um, I just despise the Blue Jays. I'm sorry. They're the most overrated team every year. Every time there's an offseason, they talk all that trash. They people say, oh, this is the year they're going to break out, and then they never do it. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year. They'll be competitive, of course, but I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. And then I don't even think the Red Sox are deserving of me talking to them. So we're going to move to the AL Central. And I'll start with you, Jackson. What are your thoughts on this division?
I mean, this is for me, it's like the most boring division in baseball. I mean, I have the Twins, and it's just like you need to pick a team out of like one of the teams have to win it. I think, I feel like every year like one of the divisions in Major League Baseball just really, really shit. And I think that it'll be this one, and we'll all kind of be like, okay, well, like they're gonna lose to whoever is the top wild card, and it'll be fun.
Yeah, that's definitely valid. My opinion on this division. Now, last year I called it perfectly. I said the Twins were going to win the division. I saw the Guardians play against the Yankees. They were so annoying, and I just knew that their way of baseball was not sustainable in this era. They fell off, and everyone else in this division just isn't really that good. Now, I was thinking of picking the Guardians because this is one of those divisions where you rarely have repeat winners because there's so much there's so much change that happens, and the Twins didn't really do anything in the offseason. They lost Sonny Gray. Like they didn't really do much. I mean, they got Carlos Santana. Like he's old and washed. I just out of all five divisions, I still don't trust the Guardians, and the other three just didn't do enough to put them over the Twins. I have the Twins winning this division at like 83 wins. I really don't see this division being competitive at all. And I think the Twins are first round exits. But yeah, Zach, I'll let you wrap up this division and then we'll go to a very, very interesting AL West.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of with you guys in that I think the Twins will win it. But that's more because I do really like the Twins. I think the Guardians will put up a good fight. They've got a great young rotation with Shane Bieber, Tristan McKenzie, and Tanner Bybee, plus a couple of other guys. But there's a lot of holes in their lineup right now. Twins, however, Twins have a lot of guys who could have bounce back years from a year that they just won the division. Um, I mean, plus a bunch of young guys who will only get better. Guys like Eduard Julian, Royce Lewis, Alex Kirilloff. These are guys who are going to have big years for the Twins. Carlos Correa is going to have a big bounce back year. Byron Buxton could be about whether he can stay healthy or not. They say he's going to play center field. We'll see if that's actually true. Um, but I think the Twins have a really good roster. They've got some pitching in there as well with Pablo Lopez heading that rotation, plus some young guys in Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober. I like the Twins, and I think that they can be a strong division winner this year.
Yeah, you make a good point with all the bounce back players. It seemed like it was shocking that they won 87 games with honestly a bad Correa and a very bad Buxton, who it seemed like he just couldn't hit if he was playing DH. But anyway, we're gonna move to the AL West. I'll start it off here. Pick to win the division. I've got the Rangers winning the division. I felt like last year throughout the entire season, the Rangers were easily the best team in the division. I feel like they just had a tough stretch in September and they just choked it to the Astros. I felt confident in the Rangers in the playoffs. I picked them to win the World Series, and they actually did it. I think that this team is here to stay for a while. I mean, they have such a deep lineup and such a good core that is going to stay here. And Wyatt Langford is coming too. Like that is a huge addition to an already stacked lineup. Their pitching is good. Their bullpen is still a little meh, but seeing how they managed it in the postseason, I'm not really afraid of it collapsing. Obviously, I have Houston in the playoffs, but personally, I think that they're on the decline. I think they win around 88, 87 games. I think they slide into the sixth spot in the playoffs. I think they get the last spot. They're still going to be a tough out in the playoffs like they always are. I just see them fading a little. Their pitching is the worst it's ever been. McCullers is out for a little bit. Verlander, I mean, he's 40 now. He's starting on the IL. Valdez, in my opinion, is super overrated. Like they have some good arms. Like Hunter Brown is a nice young arm. I'm not saying that it's a bad rotation. I'm just saying that it's not as good as it's previously been. Their lineup is always stacked, and I was confused by their free agent by their offseason. They had holes on their team, and they decided to go out and spend almost $100 million on a closer who provides you 3 WAR at best in the season, and you already have a closer who you're paying $10 million. So like almost $30 million of your budget is on 2 relievers. That is horrible asset management. I don't care what team it is. So I think that they're due for some regression. I feel like the Mariners are just not good enough. They're good enough to be in the mix, but they're just not good enough, especially offensively. I have them missing the playoffs, but I just have the Astros and the Rangers in the playoffs. So Zach, I'll kick it to you for the AL West.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with some of your points about the Astros. I don't think their pitching is that good this year. Um, However, I have them winning this division. I think they have such a potent lineup. And you mentioned them having some holes that they could have filled in the offseason. Thing is, there's not really that many holes. I mean, you could look at spots to upgrade, like the outfield, but I mean, Chas McCormick in left and Jake Myers in center, they can hold it down. They're good players. They just had a breakout season from rookie catcher Yainer Diaz, and I believe he's going to do very well with the bat again this year. He's going to provide them a ton of value. Ultimately, they're just a bunch of bombers in that lineup, and it's scary to go up against. Rangers, I also think, will take a wild card spot, and I think they're pretty similar to the Astros in that they've got an amazing lineup, but the pitching is a little questionable, especially with Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer dealing with injuries to start the season. So they're going to be a little thin on starters to start the season, but once they get them back, they'll get up and running, but I don't think they'll be able to take the division. Mariners, on the other hand, are sort of the opposite. They've got one of the best rotations in baseball, and I think it will carry them to a wild card spot this time. They made some changes to their lineup, trying to avoid as many strikeouts that they were getting last year, and I think they'll be able to get in the dance this time.
Yeah, I mean, you do make a good point with Houston. I will say Jose Abreu last year was a hole on that lineup. Martin Maldonado was a hole. Like they had some holes. I get what you're saying though. Like their lineup
I
is
mean, no
still
more
pretty
Martin
deep.
Maldonado.
What? So what'd you say?
I said no more Martin Maldonado this year. I mean, they've
Yeah,
got,
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
But they got
Diaz is
Victor
going to have to start his
Caratini.
catcher spot.
They replaced him with Victor Caratini, who's also not very good. But anyway, let's move on to Jackson for the AL West, and then we'll move to the NL.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to talk about something different. I feel like you guys kind of covered most of the things, which my predictions will run through them. I have the Astros winning it, but I think it'll be very, very close at the Rangers. I think they'll be like they'll be breathing on their necks towards the end of the season. That's just kind of the vibe I'm getting. And then I have also the Mariners making the playoffs, but they'll be the 6th seed, I believe. I think the AL West is super interesting just because of the storylines. And you think about even the teams we're not mentioning in the Angels and the Athletics, obviously with super, super big off seasons, with the Angels losing Shohei and the Athletics in their impending move to Vegas. I think like it's just going to be a division fraught with storylines for the season. And I think even the Mariners, Astros, and Rangers, the Rangers, they win the World Series, but they won it in kind of a different way with how much money they spent. And I think we've seen some teams in the MLB win a World Series or compete for a World Series like that. And then they take a step back because maybe they're paying some more veteran players. You look at the Astros, I have them winning this division. I know they're probably due for regression at some point, but it's so hard to pick against them at this point. And then the Mariners, you know, you guys are absolutely right. Like they have an excellent pitching rotation. They have improved their bullpen, and their offense is basically, give it to Julio and pray. I think that you look at the past 2 years, and both past 2 years they've won a lot of games and lost a lot of games by single digit score, like 1 or 2 runs, I mean. And so when I think about that, I mean it's just one of those tough things where they're going to make the playoffs barely, or they're going to lose the playoffs barely. It's going to be because of a lot of those games that they win or lose by a few runs. But I have them getting in just because that pitching is so good that if it keeps them in games, I have them winning some of those that maybe they lost last year. And if I were to, prophesize the trade deadline, I think they'd make a big swing for either a third baseman or a right fielder, and say, we may have lost Eugenio Suarez and Jared Kelenic, but we have someone in our mind that we really want to pair with Julio. And I think that's just kind of I think that's going to be the end goal for the Mariners, and I think they'll slide into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, like no one's really denying how good that rotation is for Seattle. I just think that that lineup is just too bad. But they could definitely make the playoffs. They're definitely a strong team. We're gonna move to the NL now. I'll start with you, Zach. This is a very familiar division for you as a Phillies fan. So, who's your pick to win the NL East, and who do you think's gonna make the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this is a pretty easy pick. Even as a Phillies fan, Braves are going to win this division. They're too good. They were ridiculously good last year, and they're going to be ridiculously good again this year. Can't really count on many of their guys to get worse. I think Orlando Arcia might not have the same year he had last year, um, but everyone else is just as good as they are pumped up to be. Chris Sale is going to be good for them if he stays healthy. People forget how good Chris Sale can be. That being said, the Phillies are also the Phillies, and they've made the playoffs the past 2 years as a wild card team, and I think they'll make it there again. They're not necessarily built for the regular season; they're built for the postseason. So I don't think that they can pass the Braves in this division, but they'll definitely get in the dance. And as for the Marlins, I don't have them making the playoffs. I think they're going to regress from last year. The lineup is absolutely awful. Um, when Luis Arias and Jake Berger are your best hitters in a lineup, that's not something to brag about. And the starting pitching, which generally has been pretty good for the Marlins with a bunch of these young guys coming up, is just injured right now. Braxton Garrett, Edward Cabrera, Yuri Perez, all dealing with injuries to start the season. The Marlins don't really know how much they're going to get from them. And I mean, they've got a bunch of star young pitchers on the IL. I don't know how they're going to win enough games to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, you make some great points there, Zach. I'll kick it to Jackson first, and then I'll give my points on this division.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably reiterate some of the stuff Zach said. I mean, I have the Braves winning the division. I think in general, it's kind of hard to pick against the team that has the clear best player in the division. Obviously with the Mike Trout caveat. But I think that, Ronald Acuna Jr. is just that guy. And then you think about, the rest of the roster, it's just like, it's so hard to pick against them. And, even last year when Acuna had some injury problems, they got through it. And so I think that, it kind of shows that they're just a team built to win. So I have them winning this division. I'll agree with Zach and say the Phillies will be a wild card team. It's so hard for me to understand the Phillies. Every year it's like, mid-July they're out, they need to rebuild, and then, by October they're going to compete for a World Series. So, on the one hand, I look at their roster and see a couple of vets, and you're like, okay, well, they're going to get injured, and they're injury prone, and yet they still do it. And it's like, okay, at this point, I won't pick against them. I think the Marlins. I agree with Zach, and I just think that their rotation is young and it's cool and it's inspiring. But I think it's a totally different thing to compete for a playoff spot going into the season wanting to compete versus being the kind of dark horse that comes out of nowhere and it's like fun. I think we saw that kind of with the Mariners last year, where like as soon as everyone said they can compete, they didn't. And so I think, the Marlins will, I think they'll struggle at first and maybe come in at the end, but it won't be enough for a playoff. So Braves and Phillies for me.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have the same. Like I'm gonna keep it short and sweet because I have the same. I have the Braves winning the division. I mean, they're so easily the best team in this division. Phillies in the wild card. I mean, didn't really do much, but they're just still a very strong team. Regarding the Marlins, last year, I know ball. I picked them as my dark horse. They made the playoffs. I'm very proud of that, but I think that they're going to regress. They had a terrible offseason. They lost Kim Ng, I think I said that right, their GM, because apparently they were going to put someone ahead of her in the organization after she built a good team that made the playoffs. And she said, screw that, I'm leaving. So she left. So they lost their really good GM. And then they just didn't do anything. They just didn't do anything. At least make an effort to do something. They didn't do it. They're going to regress a little. I don't think they're going to be trash like they were before. I think they're going to be like 76, 77 wins on the year. And then, the Mets, I actually think the Mets are going to surprise people a little. I think they'll be right around 500, not in playoff contention, but I think they'll be right around 500. It's kind of similar to the Yankees where they just had a horrible season, and I don't think it can be worse than last year. not enough for the playoffs, in my opinion. And then, like, who cares about Washington? They're still rebuilding. And then, yeah. So now we're going to move to the NL Central, which I think is probably the most interesting division, in my opinion. And I'll start with you, Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, I have the Cardinals winning this division, but and this is like I'm kind of cheating here. I'm having some Cubs premonition that this is the year with all Cardinals, veterans and whatever. They just kind of they gonna go throughout the whole year, and everyone's saying, okay, we're waiting for the playoff push, waiting for playoff push, and it just never comes. And I like the Cubs and Shoto Imanaga. I can't Imanaga. Their big rookie. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Japanese pitchers this year, and I think that the Cubs, despite their kind of historicalness in the MLB, I think just kind of the vibes and the mentality I think around the Cubs could kind of help them get into the playoffs in a division that has like been ruled by the Cardinals for the past couple of years. I think the Cubs could come in and take it, but I'm going to go with the Cardinals for now and trust that, it's this the veterans and they squeak into the playoffs.
Okay. For this division, this was the hardest to predict for me. So you see the Pirates, they're not winning the division. Sorry, Pirates fans, you're not winning the division. Maybe they'll have a breakout year from a bunch of their young guys, and then like Henry Davis comes up, and then Paul Skeens comes up, and then O'Neal Cruz breaks out. That's best case scenario, and then they make the wild card. They're not winning the division. You have the Brewers, who are the most mid team ever. They never try to win, and they still win regardless, just based off of their rotation. But now they don't have that rotation because Corbin Burns is gone. Brandon Woodruff is out for the season. I think the Brewers are not going to be in the playoffs this year. Moving to the Cardinals. Cardinals were horrible last year. I think they got like 70 wins. For them to win the division, they would need to get a plus 15 in wins. And what did they do in the offseason? They got Sonny Gray. I mean, solid starting pitcher. They got Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, Matt Carpenter. They think this is 2012 all over again. I don't like the Cardinals offseason at all. I only like the Sonny Gray move, and he's old too. He's 33 years old. People don't realize that. I don't like the Cardinals this year. Moving to the Cubs. The Cubs are an interesting one. The Cubs, I'm honestly I don't want to say I'm a Cubs hater. I just don't like their vision. I mean, ever since they sold everybody at the deadline in 2021, what have they done? All they've done is just spend money on okay free agents. That's not how you rebuild. You trade away your guys and you let your young guys develop. They had a solid season last year, strictly because of a Bellinger insanity run. I don't think he's going to have the same numbers that he did last year. He's still going to be a solid player. Don't get me wrong. But I think he's not going to be the same player he was last year. I think the Cubs are not that good. I think the Cubs are going to get like 79 wins. I don't think they're going to be above 500. So that leaves us with Cincinnati. Cincinnati had a great year last year. They struggled at the end of the year, but they had a great year. They finished with, I think, 83 wins with that young core. That team reminds me exactly of the 2022 Orioles heading into 2023. Don't really do much in free agency, although they did get Heimer Candelario and a couple pitchers. They did more than the Orioles in free agency, but still didn't do that much. They had a really, really good year the previous year with a surprising young core, but just didn't have enough to make the playoffs. I think they're like the Orioles of last year. I don't think they're going to win 100 games like them, but I think that they're going to be very good. And I think that they're going to win this division at like 87, 88 wins. Not like the Orioles, but I think they're going to win the division. So, Zach, I'll kick it to you. I have nobody else in this division in the playoffs besides Cincinnati, but I'll kick it to you, Zach, and then we'll go to the final division before the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, I'm tempted to pick the Cardinals. I think last year was sort of a fluke year. No one really knew why they did as bad as they did. And I think they're definitely bouncing back this year, and I think they'll be challenging for the division title very strongly with guys like Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, a couple of, Hall of Fame bound veterans, plus some young guys like Nolan Gorman, who we know can hit. But that rotation is just way too old and way too shaky. couple of injuries, and I don't know how they're going to make it through the regular season. Who I have winning this division is the Cubs. They've got a lot of good pieces, and I think they've been building something. They had a nice run last year and just barely missed out on the playoffs. They've got a real nice player in Seiya Suzuki in the outfield there, who's I think going to get much better after having a very nice year last year. They've got one of the best double play tandems in baseball with Dansby Swanson at short and Nico Horner at second base. Both of them can field spectacularly and can swing the bat pretty well as well. Plus, they've got a pretty good rotation. Justin Steele at the top of it, getting a lot of Cy Young votes, plus Shota Imanaga, the rookie from Japan, who I think will be quite good, and some back end help from Kyle Hendricks and Jamison Tyone. Bullpen guys like Adbert Alzolay and Hector Neris. I think this Cubs team can be very good this year, and I think they'll be able to make the playoffs.
Zach, I cannot believe you just said a positive thing about Hector Neris as a Phillies fan.
Hector Neris is a good relief pitcher, and he's going to be good for the Cubs. One more thing I will touch on. Cody Bellinger, I don't think he'll have the same year as he had last year, but he is a shoo-in for plus fielding value, plus base running value, and I think he'll be a plus hitter as well. Maybe not an 881 OPS, but he'll be in the 800. He had a much improved K percentage and whiff percentage last year, and I think that plate discipline will help him round out his batting in the future.
Yeah, I mean, Bellinger has had a good track record. He just had a rough stretch. Yeah, so that's it for the NL Central. We're going to move to the NL West now. I'll start here. I mean, if you don't pick the Dodgers to win the division, like either you're a fan of another team in the division or something is wrong with you, like respectfully. The Dodgers are such an easy pick for the division. They've won the division 10 out of the last 11 years, I think, and the only year they didn't was just like a fluke run by the Giants in 2021. For who's going to make the playoffs, I think that three teams are. I think the Dodgers are going to easily win the division. I think they're going to have the best record in the MLB. Arizona, I have them in the playoffs. They were another sleeper that I called correctly last year. And then I have the San Francisco Giants making the playoffs this year. I loved their offseason. Like the Giants, they for some reason have never been able to attract superstars, but they still were able to improve their team significantly. I mean, they got Jung Ho Lee, they got Jorge Soler, they got Blake Snell, they got Jordan Hicks. Like those are some very solid players, and I'm surely forgetting more players that they acquired this offseason. Matt Chapman, yes, he's super overrated offensively, but he alone will provide you with 3 WAR just because of his glove. He's a great player. He's not going to be the best hitter, but he's a great player defensively. They had a great offseason. They already had a good starting rotation, and it's only better with Blake Snell now. Snell and Webb is a really, really good 1-2 that people don't realize. Logan Webb is like one of the most underrated pitchers in the league, in my opinion. I think they're shooing for a wild card spot. I have them at the 6 just because I feel like the Diamondbacks and the Phillies have proven themselves more, but they're definitely a good team. The Padres, I think, are going to be kind of around the same. You know, they lost a lot of talent, but they also were really unlucky last year. So I think that cancels out. And then the Rockies, I mean, talk about one of the biggest disasters in the MLB. So I'm gonna kick it to Zach and then to Jackson for this division, and then we'll talk about our playoff brackets.
Yeah, I got the Dodgers winning this division as well. Like you said, I think people are crazy if they don't. I mean, even if you want to give them some knocks for having, an injury-prone rotation or things like that, the Dodgers find a way to win games in the regular season. They have figured it out, and they've got more talent than ever on their team. They're going to win the division. In terms of who else I have making it in, I also have the D-backs and I also have the Giants. I think they're two very good teams that had two very good off season. To highlight the D-backs first, this lineup is looking pretty nice now. I mean, they added some names like Jock Peterson. They brought Lourdes Gurriel back. And with Corbin Carroll at the top of it, leading everything, they are looking quite scary. Guys like Gabriel Moreno and Alec Thomas could get better. They have a guy, Jordan Lawler, who could really break out at shortstop. And if he doesn't, they've got Perdomo, who will provide defensive value no matter what. And the rotation, Gallen and Kelly at the top is great, but I had pegged as a breakout candidate last year. And while it didn't happen in the regular season, I, as a Phillies fan, got to see firsthand how good he was in the NLCS, and I think he's going to continue that this year. Plus, they added in Eduardo Rodriguez, who is a very nice pitcher himself. That is 4 very good pitchers in that rotation, and I think it's going to bring them to a playoff spot. And like you said with the Giants as well, that 1-2 punch of Snell and Webb is going to be dominant at the top of the rotation. Plus some young guys like Kyle Harrison, who I think could really contribute as well. And you said you think Matt Chapman is an overrated hitter. I actually think after last year, with the way people were treating Matt Chapman, I think he's a little bit of an underrated hitter. I think he got kind of unlucky. I think he's going to have more home runs this year. He'll find more of that pop in his bat. And I think we're going to be back to seeing the Matt Chapman that we're all used to seeing. Other than that, the Giants have a consistent strategy of putting above average players in their lineup, and that's what they have here. They've got a bunch of above average players, none of them real superstars though. But I do think it'll be enough to get them a playoff spot in this loaded division.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same predictions as you, so I can't disagree with you. Jackson, we'll kick it to you, and then we'll move to our playoff brackets.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of tough to say anything about the Dodgers that you guys haven't said yet. I mean, it's like critical mass with the amount of talent they have and the resources they have. It's just like, come on, guys. Like, like you said, Nick, if you're not picking them, you're crazy or you're, the smartest man ever. So okay, we'll move on. I have the Diamondbacks coming in second in this division and thus making the playoffs. I think they had kind of a sneaky good offseason in a division that's kind of talked about a lot. I think that Eduardo Rodriguez is a really good pitching signing to kind of round out that rotation that I think a lot of people kind of saw as their weakness. They go to the World Series and they have pitching weakness, but I think Eduardo Rodriguez really helps there. I think that as well as a Mariners fan, I have to shout out Eugenio Suarez. He strikes out a lot, but he hits a lot of home runs. And if he's on, he's on, and I think he wins you a lot of games. Jock Peterson wins you a lot of games, and so I think they make the playoffs. And then my difference between you guys is I have the Padres instead of the Giants making the playoffs here. We've kind of mentioned it with both of the New York teams that you really can't get worse. I mean, the Padres just had a disaster of the season. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And so I think this year they'll bounce back a bit. I agree with a lot of the stuff you said about the Giants, but I think the Padres slot in third and make the playoffs. I think just, abstractly thinking about guys like Xander Bogaerts, Fernando Tatis, Manny Machado, Ha-Seong Kim, these are guys that are just good baseball players. And I think that at the end of the day, even if they had a down year last year, I think the stakes are lower, expectations are lower, and I think they make the playoffs because of that.
Yeah, I mean, the Padres are still very talented. I just personally could not pick them because they lost like an insane amount of WAR. I mean, Josh Hader isn't a lot of WAR because he's a closer, but he was a huge loss. I mean, you have Blake Snell, he's gone. You have Juan Soto, he's gone. Like, I personally can't. I could see it happening, but I just can't pick it. So now we'll move to the playoffs. So we're gonna start with the wild card series only. I'm gonna go to you, Zach, first. Who do you think is gonna win in the wild card series?
Yeah, so over in the NL, I've got the 6-seeded Giants over the 3-seeded Cardinals. I think that combo of Snell and Webb at the top of that Giants rotation is going to be able to win them 2 games at least. And then I've got the 4-seeded Phillies over the 5-seeded Diamondbacks. Phillies sort of get their revenge for the NLCS, I think. They're a very good team with Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola, plus Ranger Suarez at the top of that rotation. And I think that bodes well for them in a 3-game wild card series. Plus, a lot of power hitters. They can easily get hot, which they've done the past 2 postseasons, and just completely drive a team out. And then over in the AL, I've got the 3-seeded Twins over the 6-seeded Mariners. Like I said, I really believe in this Twins lineup. I think they've got a lot of potent power in there, and I think we're going to see, essentially, we're going to see them bash their way through the regular season and through the postseason as well. And then I've got the 4-seeded Yankees over the 5-seeded Rangers. Garrett Cole is a dominant starting pitcher, and I'd be surprised if even the Rangers' potent lineup would be able to get to him in a wild card game. Plus, having guys like Carlos Rodon, Aaron Judge, and Juan Soto in that lineup, I think they'll be able to do enough to get past the Rangers, even with them winning the World Series last year.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have some similar picks. Like, if we're gonna talk about the wild card series, it's pretty boring to pick because you have matchups that are easy and you have matchups that are hard. But anyway, Jackson, I'll go to you and then we'll go to me and then we'll go over the championship series and the World Series.
We're doing the wild card division right now, though.
The wild card series, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's what I thought. Sorry. So I'm gonna go first. We'll start with the NL, and we have the 6-seeded Padres over the 3-seeded Cardinals. I don't like the NL Central, but I think the Padres. I think they're one of those teams where I think that it's more likely that they don't make the playoffs than they don't win a playoff series. I don't know if I phrased that right, but I just think in the playoffs, talent matters a little bit more. And in a concentrated 3-game series, I think they take that one. Phillies over Diamondbacks. Zach kind of spoke on this because we had a similar idea here, but I think that would be a really fun series because I think the way the Diamondbacks upgraded their pitching and the Phillies are obviously have their hit power. I think that'd just be a really fun series, and I think it'll be just a classic one where it's going back and forth, and I think the Phillies get the revenge in the end. On the AL side, I have the Orioles, the 5-seed Orioles beating the 4-seeded Rangers. I think that's the series that everyone's like, oh, the Rangers are experienced, they'll win. And I think the Orioles, a little bit of youth, they'll come out, surprise everyone and beat them. And then I have the 6-seeded Mariners over the 3-seeded Twins. I just think that in a three-game series, the Mariners pitching is, almost, it's not unmatched, but it's up there. Going, Castillo, Gilbert, Kirby, it's tough. And especially if you're going to have, Miller, Wu, even Hancock as starters that can come off the bench, I think, the Mariners win the wild card.
Yeah, I mean, I have similar picks for my wild card. I have the Giants as the 6th seed, but I think they're going to be a really strong 6th seed. I have them playing the Reds at the 3 seed, and I have the Giants sweeping that series. I think that the Reds are going to come into the playoffs really young. They're going to be super amped. I just don't think they have the pitching to win, especially a short series like that when the Giants have one of the best 1-2 punches in the rotation in Blake Snell and Logan Webb. So I like the Giants, and their lineup has a lot of playoff experience. You got Jorge Soler, who's a World Series champion. You have Matt Chapman, who's been in the playoffs a lot. You have other guys in there as well. I like the Giants in that series. Moving down, I have the Phillies over the Diamondbacks as well, 4-5. I mean, I think if they were to rematch, I would like the Phillies in that, strictly because of how frustrated the Phillies would play after last year when they choked the 2-0 and the 3-2 leads.
Plus, no Craig Kimbrell this year.
Anyway, I have in the AL, I have the 6-seeded Astros over the 3-seeded Twins. I think the Astros are going to regress hard, but like I said, I still have them as 87-ish wins and still a potent team in the playoffs. And if they were to match up with the Twins, who I have winning 83 games and being a division winner, they would be the better team. I think they would sweep that series. And then I have the 4-seeded Yankees over the 5-seeded. Yeah, the Yankees over the Rays. I have the Yankees over the Rays. I'm sorry, but we're so much talented than the Rays, especially if we had home field. I'm sorry, we're winning that series. I mean, you got Zach Eflin in game 1. We'll have Garrett Cole. Thank God he doesn't have Tommy John. Come on now. Use your brain when you predict. Moving So we're gonna move now to the division series, and then we're gonna go to the championship. Or actually, we're just gonna go throughout the entire playoffs. So we're gonna go championship, division, World Series for you, Zach, and then we'll do it all for Jackson, and then we'll do it all for me.
All right. Yeah. Over on the NL side in the division series, I've got the 1-seeded Dodgers over my 4-seeded Phillies. Past couple of years, Phillies have drawn the Braves in the division series and have gone out and beat them. I don't think they could take on this Dodgers squad, quite frankly. And each year we've been losing a series earlier, so I think that'll continue. This Dodger squad is insanely talented, and I believe they're built for the playoffs this time. If they can keep guys like Tyler Glasnow and Clayton Kershaw healthy for these playoffs, that rotation is going to be dominant. Plus Yamamoto is there. And then I've got the 2-seeded Braves over the 6-seeded Giants. I think the Braves finally make it to the NLCS. Once again, just a loaded lineup, a very good rotation as well with Spencer Strider, who is the Cy Young favorite at this point at the top of it. Over in the AL, I've got a divisional matchup. I've got the 1-seeded Orioles beating the 4-seeded Yankees. I know that hurts for you to hear, Nick. Like I said, I believe in the Orioles' young talent this year. I think Corbin Burns being their ace on the staff provides them a lot of help in these playoff series instead of having to rely on guys like Kyle Bradish and Dean Kramer, who are good as secondary options, but not as a team's ace. Yankees, I think, just have too many holes in the lineup that I'm not sure if they'll go too far in the playoffs. And then I've got the 3-seeded Twins getting revenge and beating the 2-seeded Astros. Like I said, I think this Twins team is very good, and the Astros pitching is shaky this year. Verlander's pretty old. I don't know if he's going to be the same Verlander we've seen before. McCullers is out, and the young pitching, I'm not sure about it. I think JP France will regress. I don't think Framber Valdez is all that good as people make him out to be, and Christian Javier has not developed like they wanted him to. Moving on to the championship series, I've got the Dodgers beating the Braves in the NL. I know it's sort of a classic pick, probably the two best teams in the NL going into the year, but probably the most likely option to happen in the championship series, and I believe that it will. This Dodgers team is so stacked with talent. Some of the guys that people don't even mention, they've got that top three of Freeman, Ohtani, and Betts. People don't even mention Will Smith, Max Muncy. I mean, these are good hitters in that lineup, and they're, side notes on this team, which is insane. And then over in the AL, I've got the Twins beating the Orioles. I feel like they'll be the sort of Cinderella team that goes on a crazy playoff run. They just won their first playoff game in forever, first playoff series in forever last year, and I think they're going to build on that this year with a bunch of young guys leading the way. Royce Lewis will probably hit a grand slam or something in Game 6. And then in the World Series, fortunately, comes to an end for the Twins, and I think the Dodgers will beat them probably in 5 or 6 games. I don't think it'll be a clean sweep. Twins will be able to get the better of them a little bit, but not enough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, pretty boring pick, Zach. AL wise, it's pretty interesting. The Twins is a very bold prediction, so I'll give you credit for that. Jackson, let's hear your playoff predictions, and then I'll wrap us up.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll disappoint Nick a little bit more in my chalk NL picks. Yeah, I mean, I've got the Dodgers being the Phillies 1/4. Yeah, the Phillies seem to, do some kind of a ritual around the fall, and they become super team. It's just really hard to logically pick against the Dodgers with how good that team is. Zach, ran through it. Max Muncy is like, who cares about him? But it's like, what? You got Freddie Freeman out there, and he's like, what, the third best player? Maybe. I mean, it's ridiculous. And then you talk about the pitching, and it's like, okay, well, I have them being the Phillies. I've got the Braves being the Padres, and I changed this right before I was thinking about it. I think the Padres. I'm a little optimistic about their talent in the playoffs, but I think the Braves, after disappointing last year to the Phillies, I think they'll win and advance to the championship series. Where I have the Dodgers beating the Braves, where I just think that I just think I think that the Braves are good, but I think that they'll run out of steam in the championship series, and the Dodgers will pick up the pieces. And even if the Dodgers are choking along the way, I think that they'll just have enough little bits to get them to the World Series. On the AL side, I have the Mariners over the Rays in a 6-2. I think, 2 years ago the Mariners were a couple choke games away from the championship series. I think that if you give them anyone other than that Astros team, they make it back. And so I have them going to the championship series. And then the series I really can't decide who's going to win. So it's one seeded Astros against the 5-seeded Orioles, a rematch from last year. It's a perfect series where you have on the one hand like the vet team versus the young Bucks. I think the Orioles pushed the Astros much farther than they did last year, but I have the Astros in the end. They just have guys that win, and I think that's what matters in the fall. And then it breaks my heart, but I think the Astros then beat the Mariners in the championship series because once the Astros are in that position, I know they lost to the Rangers last year, but I think they'll be playing with a lot of vengeance in their hearts and saying, responding to a lot of fans who are saying they didn't make enough moves. But you signed Josh Hader, and maybe you re-signed Josh Hader, and you extended your franchise guy. That can be enough that gets you back to the World Series. And then so in the ultimate chalk matchup, Dodgers v Astros, I'll go with the ultimate chalk pick, and I'll pick the Dodgers. I think if they get to the World Series, I think they'll mentally realize that they're not always choking and that they haven't choked in 2 games in the playoffs or 2 series, excuse me. And I think they get the job done, and everyone is sad because Clayton Kershaw doesn't get a ring, or he doesn't get a real ring because I don't know if we count whatever the bubble was.
Okay, let's be honest. Like, it counts. Like, obviously it was a different year, but everybody had to deal with COVID. Everybody had the same season. Like, it counts. It counts. The Astros in 2017 does not count. But
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm just saying for some people.
yeah. Anyway, let's move to my
Coming from a
playoff
Yankees
predictions. So in the division series, you're gonna notice a trend here. There is a lot of parity in the division series with the new format. In the last 2 years, the 6th seed in the NL has made the World Series. I don't have my 6th seed in the World Series. I just want to point that out. The first 2 seasons of this format, the 1 and the 2 in the NL, have gone out in the first round, both seasons. In the AL, it's a little different. There's a little less parity, but the 1 seed went out last year. The 1 seed didn't even win 1 game. The 2 seed, they won because it's Houston. But anyway, moving to my picks, I have the 4-seeded Yankees over the 1-seeded Rangers. I feel like the Rangers, if they came into the year or into the playoffs as the 1 seed and the defending champs, I feel like they're going to be cold. They're going to have a long break. They're going to come in cold. Are they really going to be that motivated after winning the World Series the year before? While on the other hand, the Yankees are going to have a good opportunity to finally make a run. They're going to be hot because they just played the Rays. I like the Yankees in that series in 4 games. I also honestly trust the Yankees starting pitching more than the Rangers. Obviously, the Rangers have a better lineup, but I trust the Yankees starting pitching if we have Garrett Cole. Of course, if we don't, completely different story. Moving on, I have the 2-seeded Orioles over the 6-seeded Astros. I just think it comes to a point where the Astros are too old. Yes, they have so much playoff experience and they've won a championship, not multiple championships. But I feel like it comes to a point where you're just too old and the Orioles are just too good. The Orioles I have winning the series in 5 games. And then in the National League, I have the 6-seeded Giants over the 2-seeded Braves. The 6th seed for some reason is just so goated in the NL. The Braves for some reason just suck with the new format. I think it happens again, and I think it plays into the favor of the Giants having such a good rotation. with Snell and Webb, I feel like that's just going to help them so much. Having 4 out of the 5 games be Snell and Webb, I think that they're going to win that series. Now, I really wanted to pick the Dodgers to lose, but I feel like there's no way both the Dodgers and the Dodgers and the Braves lose for 3 years in a row in the DS. And if I had to pick one of the 2 teams to advance, it would be the Dodgers. I mean, they're just absolutely loaded. I don't even need to say anything about it. And I have them beating the Phillies in 4 games. Moving to the championship series, I have the 4-seeding Yankees over the 2-seeded Orioles. You can call me biased. I'm gladly willing to accept it. I probably am biased. But
Nick,
if
you're
that were
biased.
to happen, okay, sure. If that were to happen and the Orioles and the Yankees were in the ALCS, I'm going to be honest, I would trust the Yankees in that series. The Yankees have more experience. The Orioles are a lot younger. I feel like the Orioles will be coming off an emotional series win over the Astros, and I think the Yankees would be even more motivated than they were in the last round. They finally don't have to play Houston. They're going to have a good chance to finally make the World Series. I think that they would do that in this series. In the NL, I have the Dodgers over the Giants. That would be such an epic NLCS, having the Dodgers-Giants rivalry, having a hot Giants team as the underdog, and having the Dodgers, who are the super team. That would be such a fun series. I think the Dodgers handle it in 6 games, though. I think that Snell and Webb, again, will help them out a lot, but it won't be enough in a 7-game series. Moving to the World Series, I mean, I can't have the Yankees in the World Series and then not pick them. I just can't do it. Sure, the Dodgers are the better team. But picking the favorite is so boring, man. Like, that's like picking UConn in March Madness. So boring. I'm from Connecticut, and I'm saying that. I hate picking the favorite. I can't pick the Dodgers to win the World Series. You can call me biased, but the way the bracket works out, I think in this scenario, it helps the Yankees. So I'm going with the Yankees to win the World Series, even though I don't really expect it to happen. So anyway, that is going to be it for the Lehigh University Student Broadcasting
Nick,
Podcast.
one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Zach.
have one more thing too.
Go ahead.
You say you hate picking favorites, Nick, but you really seem to love picking the Yankees.
I'm talking
Not saying
about
they're favorites, just saying.
betting favorites. The Yankees are not a betting favorite.
Oh, I know they're not betting favorites. I just think you love picking.
I actually didn't pick them last year. So anyway, uh Jackson, do you have anything or are we gonna wrap this
Yeah, I
up?
was gonna say, I think that the MLB playoff format is one of my least favorite in literally any sport ever. I just dislike it. I love the idea that the underdog can win. I love it, absolutely. But it doesn't work in baseball. In my opinion, it just doesn't work. Um, though it's contradictory to be like, okay, look, you're gonna play the longest season in any of the major sports leagues, but we're also going to create a system that makes upsets probable. Like, you have to reward teams greater for their, long-term success in the season. I'm a Mariners fan. It helped us, 2 years ago. And we would have been at it would have helped us last year if we had made it. I think that, at a certain point, the MLB is just going to end up adding more teams so that we don't have this weird system. And it's also just confusing why they don't reseed. I think they should reseed after the wild card round, because if you're the 1 seed, let's say, and the 6 seed wins, you should get to play the 6 seed because they are the lowest seed. And you shouldn't let them, because that's why you have 6 seeds going far. Because if the 6 seeds wins their wild card game, they get to go play the 3 seed, who can be a
2 seed.
significantly step worse than the 2 and the 1 seed, and then all of a sudden they're on their way. Or I misspoke. They get to play the 2 seed, which can be significantly worse than the 1 seed. And now they're on their way and they're like, oh, what an underdog story. But like, if you actually look at the teams they're facing, not necessarily. But yeah, that I just think it's a bad system that'll be changed in the near future.
I mean, I
Well,
agree with you on reseeding. I think that it should be a reseed. I think the 6 seed, if they beat the 3, should play the 1 and then yada yada yada. But I mean, my take on that is like if you're the Braves or the Dodgers and you don't like it, shut up and play better. Like
that's
play
fair.
better. If you don't like it, play better. I agree on the reseeding though. I think that should happen. But anyway,
I'll take the other side. I don't like reseeding. I think having a nice clean bracket is awesome. You know who you're gonna play next. We've gotten some great matchups out of it the past 2 years, some great stories. I mean, like Jackson, you mentioned it. Underdogs are winning. It's fun to watch underdogs win. Let's keep it happening. I mean, why not?
Zach's just saying that because the Phillies were the 6th seed. But anyway,
Of course. I mean, it was fun for us.
anyway, we're
Not
gonna
so fun when the Diamondbacks beat us, but you know.
yeah. Anyway, we're gonna all stop yapping and we are going to conclude this podcast. Thank you guys for watching. Yeah, I mean, do you guys have anything else before we finish? Nope. All right.
Julio MVP.
Go Phillies.
Go Yaks. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. See you guys next one. Take care.